Uh, Excuse me, Rana, could you give first speech to the president because we're already late.
Yeah, okay.
I
Okay.
can contribute later on. Then because Debbie has to go to another meeting.
Okay.
She for half an hour. Okay.
Okay, so I can actually get started. And okay, first of all, I would like to say Assalamu alaikum and good morning and good afternoon to some people who are joining us from like Pakistan because it's afternoon time over there. The topic for today we are going to be joining upon is about Kashmiri women struggling under conflict. And the other thing I would like to say is the Happy International Women's Day. So actually today here to actually talk about the Kashmiri women. Myself is Rahana Ali, and I am the Information Secretary for Tehreek-e-Kashmir UK, and I'm also the mediator for today. I would like to first of all call upon His Excellency, the President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, Sardar Masood Khan. Just as of a reminder, you will be given 10 minutes for your speech, and then after that, we will pass it on to other speakers because today we have a lot of speakers who have a commitment, so they would not be able to stay for long. So I would like to ask the President to do the opening remarks, please.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Kani, for organizing this webinar on a very appropriate day. Today is International Women's Day. This day is about empowerment of women and promotion and protection of their rights all over the world. It's a universal norm, and it is being pursued in many parts of the world. But we have to sharply focus on the situation in the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And various testimonies have been given by international human rights organizations that for the past 3 decades, women in Kashmir have been sexually molested and attacked and abused in a manner which doesn't find precedence in the recent history of mankind. Now, let me give you some very startling figures which have been collated and shared by Kashmir Media Service today. And these are that women which have been killed from January 2001 to March 8, 2021, that is today, is 675. Women widowed, which means that whose husbands have been killed, is 22,924. And this is the period from 1989 until now. And women who have been gang raped or molested from 1989 to today is 11,235. These are very staggering and startling figures. Women who have disappeared, of course, there's one woman who has disappeared, and half widows who do not know whether their husbands are alive or dead because they disappeared through custodial killings or they could not be traced after they were taken into custody by the Indian occupation forces. Now you just look at these figures and you have an idea of the crisis that the Kashmiri women are facing. Now, last month, which was 23rd of February, we marked this day called Kunan Pushpura Day, because decades ago, in the early 90s, some 88 women, or more than that, as a matter of some claims, more than that, women were gang raped by Indian occupation forces. Kunan Pushpura was cordoned off by the security personnel, and then they were gang raped, and since then there has been no legal proceeding against the culprits, either within the army or in the civilian courts. All the evidence that was produced has been set aside or quashed or has been made irrelevant. So women in Kashmir are suffering on many scores. One, of course, is direct attack, rape, or molestation. Second is that when these cordon and search operations are conducted by the armed forces. They usually vandalize houses, insult women, try to intimidate women, and sometimes it ranges from sexual innuendos, like getting married to them, to abuse or rape. So this is what happens. Then, of course, I would also like to remind that since 2019, I mean August the 5th, 2019, women have been a special target of the security forces. When India invaded and reoccupied the territory on August the 5th, 2019, Hindu zealots or the extremists, violent extremists, they started saying that women were now they belong, the Kashmiri women belong to them. So they tried to not just weaponize women's bodies, but also try to fetishize them, objectify them. So that was condemned universally at that time. And that kind of pattern has continued up to this day. Also, I would say that women are the most tortured and tormented segment of society. A couple of years ago, a medical study was conducted, and it established that 50%, nearly 50% of Kashmiri population, adult Kashmiri population, is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and the number of women suffering from this disorder is disproportionately large because of the conflict, because of the depredations and brutalization that goes on every day. As I've already pointed out, that the agony of and suffering of the half widows is acute. Let me also tell you that in the aftermath of August the 5th, 2019, 13 to 14,000 boys were detained by Indian occupation authorities in the Indian occupied Kashmir, and they were also sent to northern India in different prisons and concentration camps, where these boys are being re-indoctrinated or recalibrated, their minds are being recalibrated. Now, these women, the mothers, they do not know where these boys are. Most of them are incommunicado because all these boys, and some, including some children, they have been detained under the black law, which is called the Public Safety Act. And according to that act, when you are detained, you do not have a right to attorney. I mean, an attorney is not provided, or a counsel is not provided, and the relatives of the detainee do not have the right to access to the detainee. So this is another tragedy that women have to bear. In addition to the agony every day, I mean daily agony of losing their sons in these cordon search operations. Every day, some 6 to 12 young men are gunned down in cordon search operations. Now, this is one aspect that I highlighted. The sheer brutality of what is happening to Kashmiri women. Sometimes even girls as young as 8 have been molested and raped. There was one girl who was picked up, raped by a gang, kept in a temple, and her body was dismembered. Now, these are common occurrences. And in fact, what was even more appalling was that there were demonstrations later on in regard to this rape against a child, but the demonstrators were siding with Hindu extremists rather than expressing solidarity with that hapless victim, that child who fell victim to the bestiality of these rapists. most of the people, they are violent extremists I'm talking about, they are predators. Now, let me tell you that despite all these challenges, women in Kashmir are investing their time and energy in education. They are very talented, and some of the most talented professionals in the territory are women professionals. So I think that despite all this agony and suffering, women are running households. They are also running pharmacies and hospitals, and they are giving the shoulder to the households where economy has suffered massively. Let me close my remarks here by paying tribute to Tehreek-e-Kashmir, United Kingdom, Mr. Fahim Kiani, Ms. Debbie Abrahams, who has communicated to the High Commissioner for Human Rights. This is a bridge that we need to build because we salute the British parliamentarians, particularly who are working under the umbrella of All-Party Parliamentary Kashmir Group, this cross-party group, to communicate to the rest of the world. And the best interlocutors are in Geneva and New York. Geneva, where the Human Rights Council is housed, and New York, where you have the third committee in the United Nations Security Council. So your deliberations are being communicated to them, and when they are communicated to them, they would make an impact, because this is the voice of the British parliamentarians, and we, the people of Jammu and Kashmir and Pakistan, are grateful to you for the efforts that you're making, and in these difficult times, you are standing with the Kashmiris. We're beholden to you and to the British Parliament. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your excellent president of Azad Kashmir. I would like to call upon my next guest, Debbie Ibrahim, Chair of All-Party Parliamentary Group in Kashmir. Debbie Ibrahim, please. I can't hear you, Debbie. I think you're still on the mute. Okay, so Fahim Kiani, could you unmute Debbie Ibrahim, please?
Right, we've got it.
I just understood.
We're there. Thank you so much, and thank you for that very warm welcome. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody that's watching, and it is a particular honour to follow His Excellency, the President of Azad Kashmir, who I have met a number of times, and always find much in his speeches, which is of great interest. So, am I unmuted now? It seems to be going on and off. Yes. Okay. Shall I start again? Since
Sorry about that.
Okay, that's fine. Just well, again, salam alaikum. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. It's a real honour to follow His Excellency the President of Azad Kashmir, who I've met a number of times, and as I say, he always has gives much food for thought in his remarks. It's been mentioned that I am the chair of the British All-Party Parliamentary Kashmir Group, and I particularly want to express my good wishes to women everywhere on this International Women's Day, and including and especially to my sisters across Kashmir. Many of you will know that the APPG's focus has been on promoting human rights across all parts of Kashmir. But we know that across the world, the rights of women are constantly ignored. And whether that's our right to life, in some parts of the world, girl babies are seen as less important than boy babies. Daughters who are deemed to have shamed their families are punished, sometimes faithfully, without the protection of the law. And our right to education. Girls are still prevented from being educated. Our right to marry who we wish, forced marriage, female genital mutilation, these are still happening in the 21st century across the world. And our right to work in whatever job we wish, only limited by abilities, not by prejudice or discrimination, and to be paid equally for work of equal value. Our right to be treated equally under the law. Domestic violence, rape must be recognised as the serious crimes that they are. Here in the UK, 2 women a week will be killed by their partners or previous partners. This has to stop. But in spite of being explicit under Article 1 of the United Nations Convention of Human Rights that all human beings, women and men, are born free and equal in dignity and rights, that women are equal to men, as I say, we still have a long way to go to ensure that this happens. When conflict is added into the mix, any hard-fought women's rights evaporates, as we've heard. The abuse is direct and deliberate. When I visited a refugee camp in Kotli in Pakistan-administered Kashmir, I'm sorry, I can't. I'm sorry, I believe that somebody's still on the line.
Yes, can everybody please make sure that they can put themselves on mute, and once their name is called upon, they can come online. Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's fine. As I say, when I visited a refugee camp in Pakistan-administered Kashmir with the all-party group last year, we heard moving accounts of how women had been raped, leading to their fleeing their homes from Jammu and Kashmir. Sexual violence is particularly used against women as a weapon. So on this International Women's Day, I ask you to pledge your support to women's rights, which are human rights, which we all believe in, and make sure that wherever you are, whatever country, whatever community, wherever you see this discrimination and injustice, that you will stand up and do what's right and make sure that you put an end to that. This year's theme for International Women's Day is generational inequality. Let this generation know what true equality is like. Challenge these injustices, as I say, this discrimination, this abuse, wherever you see it. Choose to do what's right. Choose equality. Thank you.
Thank you for your words, Debbie Ibrahim. The next person I'm going to call upon is going to be James Durley MP, Vice Chair, All Parties Parliamentary Group for Kashmir and Joint Chair of Conservative Friends of Kashmir. James Durley, please.
He joined us, but he's going to join us after 10-15 minutes. Yes. So.
Okay, so I can actually call upon our next guest, Afzal Khan MP, Shadow Deputy Leader of House of Commons, please. Afzal Khan, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and good morning, good afternoon, and assalamu alaikum to everyone. It's a pleasure to follow 2 distinguished speakers before me, both His Excellency Sardar Saab, who is the President of Azad Jammu Kashmir, and my good colleague Debbie Abraham, who is the Chair of APPG in Kashmir. I thought what was interesting is it's always difficult to follow Sardar Saab because he is always thorough in his speech and covers almost all the aspects that you need to. So on the other hand, I suppose he's made it easy for rest of us because he has covered, so we can maybe perhaps pick 1 or 2 issues. I also realize that this is International Women's Day, and it's a day where we celebrate the achievements of the many women throughout globally, and also acknowledge the struggle that these women are still going through under the fight for the equality. I know myself as a parliamentarian in Britain, for 30 plus years now of equality laws, we are still struggling. So this struggle actually goes on. And I often say, you know, the progress we have made in the 30, 50 years now in Britain if we carry on the same pace, then it may be my great-great-granddaughter who may see the equality. And that surely isn't right. As Debbie was saying, for equal work, there should be equal pay. But that isn't the only subject of pay. I think the discrimination is wider and is deeper. And we have the responsibility, and all of us, if we want to see just and fair world, that we actually stand up for the other half. I often use the example, which may not be the best of example, but a boxer in a ring. That if you tie your one hand of a boxer and expect them to be a world champion, it doesn't matter how good they are, how strong they are never going to be a world champion. To be effective, you need to use all the resources, and that means actually using the potential talent of both men and women in this sense. So this is probably my wider sort of point, which I think we all have a responsibility. It doesn't matter where we are in the world, but this need is there, and we need to be there working together to make sure we have just a fair world. My second point, I suppose, is looking at the Kashmir, focusing there a bit more. And then what you realize that for 73 plus years now, here we are, we're seeing this struggle and the suffering that has been happening. And of course, this has been done by the whole Kashmiri community, with the whole makeup of the Kashmiri community for this whole struggle. But I think one thing is absolutely clear, as some of the speakers have already touched on, but whenever there is a conflict, whenever there is a war, then actually the heaviest burden of that conflict, the heaviest suffering actually is always carried by the woman. And that I think is true also of the Kashmiri woman here. But I think when you focus further on what has been happening, the President, His Excellency, has already touched on in detail some of those stuff. But fundamentally, that the rules of the international law, the UN resolutions, the Declaration of Human Rights of UDHR and the CEDAW all really urge us to work towards elimination. But we've seen this. One aspect, of course, has been the sexual violence which has been perpetrated against the Kashmiri women. And again, the President has talked about the gang rape, the thousands of women who have suffered that, the widow issue, the whole complexity and economic side of it. And then the unique idea you also get in the Kashmir is what's known as half widows, left in no man's land, not knowing anything what is going on with their loved one, their husbands, and being stuck in the whole sort of a quagmire of this conflict. So there are these issues which are, of course, there. And then Kannan and Pushpura, going back to the incident that happened in 1991, is still there. And you find from the UN, again, still at the July 2020 report, the UN said that there has been no progress in the Kannan Pushpura mass rape cases from 1991. And the authorities continues to thwart attempts of the survivors to get justice. So this is the UN actually talking about the Kashmiri women and their sufferings. So it has called on India to investigate and prosecute all cases of sexual violence allegedly perpetrated by state and non-state actors and provide preparations for victims. And I think the other probably point I want to touch on quickly would be, of course, building alliances. I touched on an earlier part. At the end of the day, I think this struggle means, we need to build alliances. And I would say that not only in the occupied Kashmir, but the wider Pakistan, and I would say even in India, we need to build those alliances. And you can see the suffering of the woman actually in India itself. This issue of rape, again, you see how much actually takes place in India as well. So building those alliances in the South Asia and globally, I think, is a really important step towards it. So if I can conclude, because I know you only have 1 hour and many speakers, I'll just say this, that the Kashmiri stories need to be actually picked up in media. So we need to utilize this, because this is what will create the awareness in the global community. And of course, the media themselves have a responsibility to be the voice of the voiceless. That is one of the role of the media. And ultimately, the education, economy, technology, and the wisdom are needed to resolve such issues and to secure rights of Kashmiri women. And this painful story needs to come to an end. There has to be a sustainable peace in Kashmir, which cannot be imposed by military means. Despite the fact that India has got 1 million or so army there, it's abundantly clear, actually, it's not through military means this issue will be resolved. It is through discussion. And the sooner India actually learns this fundamental point, the better it's going to be for all the parties concerned. Once again, thank you to Kiani Saab, Fahim Kiani, and the Tehreek-e-Kashmir for the good work they do and picking up these opportunities to highlight the suffering of Kashmiris. And thank you for yourself, Rihanna, for chairing and moderating this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, MP Afzal Khan, for your kind words. I would like to call upon our next guest, Lee Vehanan, former Australian Senator, please. Lee Vehanan, please.
Hello, sorry about that. Thank you very much. Happy International Women's Day to all the women who are on this session. Yes, it's good evening and happy and all the best for the afternoon and the morning. It's wonderful to be on such a global discussion. Look, I certainly do endorse the comments of the other speakers. I think as it is International Women's Day, it is worth remembering the history here. Like it was in 1910 when this historic decision was taken to hold International Women's Day. And it was moved by Clara Zetkin and Rosa Luxemburg at an international conference where there was thousands of delegates, and there was a women's session, and this motion was moved to have this special day, which has gone down in history. And what's been central to so much of International Women's Day and the women's struggle has been fighting unjust war. We saw this in the First World War, which was really a war of colonial powers. In the Second World War, it was a fight against fascism. So it was never a pacifist movement that came out of International Women's Day, but it was analysing what the forces were here and how to build a just and fair world. And as other speakers have identified, and I think this is such an important point, is that war adds to the burden that women already carry. It adds to their oppression, to their suffering. And as a president, and he gave those startling figures, spoke about how they're killed, they're tortured, and they're raped. And rape has become a weapon of war. And what also happens in war, like there's the killings of violence, but also war and the preparation for war robs the public purse, which means, again, women are being robbed of money that should be going into education and health services, building homes, creating jobs, so they can take their reach their full potential, take their part in society. Now, I wanted to bring those points together because to my mind, this is so relevant to the issue of the status of Kashmiri women, because at the moment, although war hasn't been declared against Kashmir, it is in many ways effectively a war situation. When you look at those rape figures, you look at the occupation of 800,000 Indian troops that are in Jammu Kashmir. Like these are an extraordinary numbers. The cost of that war effort would be simply staggering. And again, I emphasize it's robbing communities of services that they should be entitled to. So this is something that we need to analyse, and we need to remember that when we talk about the rape of these Kashmiri women, no Indian troops are charged. Like it just does not happen. Why doesn't it happen? Because these Indian troops have immunity. They have immunity because India has passed a law that that ensures that no military personnel, no soldier can be charged for any crime. But they are crimes. They're crimes against humanity. They're crimes against, they're effectively war crimes. But this immunity goes on and on. It really is a form of state terrorism when you have communities that are being terrorized systematically, with the women being targeted as they are with this shocking violence and with targeted rape. Again, the president gave the figures about the young boys who are taken from their homes, often in the middle of the night, in a very similar way to the way the Israeli troops drag out young Palestinian boys out of their homes. And then they're sent to jails scattered across India, so their parents really can't visit them because it's just not possible. So all this adds up to a shocking situation and putting more of a burden on women. And again, to emphasize that while this goes on, what chance of women, Kashmiri women, have of achieving equal rights, whether it's equal pay or more childcare centres or better education facilities or top-rate health facilities. Obviously the money wouldn't be there for these important rights that are set out. So I think that, again, that we need to remember on this International Women's Day that women are entitled, like all people are, to their human rights set out in the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights. That those rights should be there for Kashmiri women to enjoy. And more specifically, the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women would barely be able to meet in Kashmir and Jammu because of how India treats that state. So I think that what's so important is that while we're calling for to stand with Kashmir and to stand with Kashmir for the self-determination for the Kashmiris, I think it's incredibly important that we have a united voice for that demand across the world. But what we need to integrate into that is women's rights, because we often read about it, and I think history teaches us that no transformative change, no progressive revolution can occur without women also achieving their rights. And when it comes to Kashmir, that means ending the occupation by the Indian troops, ensuring that violence by security forces ends, and supporting Kashmiri women so they can enjoy the rights that so many women in other countries have now won. Thank you very much.
Many thanks for your detailed speech, Leader Hannan. The next person I would like to call upon, Daniel Hahn, Special Assistant to Dean John Hopkins. Daniel Hahn, please. Daniel Hahn, are you there?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, Ms. Ali and Tehreek-e-Kashmir, for the opportunity to speak today with this distinguished panel, especially with His Excellency Khan, who I admire greatly for his efforts on the Kashmir issue. As a woman and as a survivor of sexual assault, I have spent much of my life promoting gender equality and healthy masculinity, as well as researching the global rise of violence against women and how to combat it. And that is why today, March 8th, International Women's Day, is so important to commemorate, not only for me, but for all women and girls worldwide, especially Kashmiri women who have borne the brunt of the Kashmir conflict for years. When their husbands, sons, and brothers disappear or are killed at the hands of the Indian Army, they are forced to pick up the pieces and ensure their family's survival. They also constantly suffer from sexual harassment and rape by the Indian Army, as we all know, as a tool of war. And I have yet to meet one Kashmiri woman who has not experienced some form of sexual harassment at the hands of the Indian Army. And as His Excellency mentioned, a couple of weeks ago on February 23rd, we commemorated Kunan Pashpora and remembered all the women and girls who had suffered mass rape at the hands of the Indian Army on that fateful day in 1990. And to this day, the Indian government has refused to acknowledge its crimes, setting a precedent that rape and sexual harassment of Kashmiri women and girls will not only be tolerated, but protected. And on February 17th of this year, 3 Indian Army soldiers abducted and molested a girl from North Kashmir's Bandipora district before she was rescued. Per journalist Jahangir Ali, the girl's father, Abdul Majid, said, "The incident has shattered his family and his daughter is traumatized. noting she is now scared of coming out of the home and resuming tuitions. After what has happened, I don't know if she will go to school. And now this young girl will live with this trauma for the rest of her womanhood. Incidents like these make it harder for families to let their daughters leave their households. Unlike young boys who have more freedoms, women are often prevented from attending school or other activities that are important for healthy livelihoods. And as if it couldn't get any worse, there is now a video circulating around on social media that shows a couple of Indian men talking about how they cannot wait to become Indian Army soldiers in Kashmir, just so that they can rape Kashmiri women and girls. And this verbal abuse is very prevalent toward these women on social media, as I'm sure many of you have seen. And while the evidence of ongoing abuse is prevalent, little continues to be done, if at all. And beyond this terrible issue of sexual assault, Kashmiri women live in an extremely patriarchal society and must live up to societal expectations amid the conflict, which has severe implications on their physical and mental health. For instance, many Kashmiri women are unable to receive proper gynecological care because of the stigma. As a result, and as a Western woman, I have actually become a confidant for many Kashmiri women. They come to me asking questions, for example, about birth control, because they can't even ask doctors in Kashmir without facing extreme judgment. They usually have to travel to New Delhi just to get the proper healthcare that they need, because they cannot even consider discussing it with their Kashmiri family or friends. One woman I spoke to feared she might be pregnant out of wedlock, but had to lie about her symptoms just to get an appointment and a sonogram. And you might be wondering how this is relevant to the conflict, but it is incredibly relevant when women are facing such burdens to their mental and physical health on top of other responsibilities and challenges they must face due to the ongoing conflict. When you have Indian Army members who are raping and sexually assaulting women on a regular basis, Kashmiri women are already feeling a tremendous lack of control over their livelihoods and their bodies. Therefore, they must be able to have proper access to and control over their physical, mental, and gynecological health, as well as how they choose to live their lives. Kashmiri women are expected to be household caretakers, often marrying in arranged marriages and raising children with little support from their husbands. This emotional burden and pressure is already exacerbated by the ongoing conflict, confining them to their homes and making access to educational opportunities strained. Numerous Kashmiri women are telling me that they are depressed, especially when they think about being confined to their homes, marrying someone that they do not love, and carrying out household obligations. This is a future forced upon them when they have other aspirations that they are being prevented from achieving. It feels like a prison to them in Kashmir, which is already a prison in itself. And yet, receiving mental health support in particular is so stigmatized that when I encourage women to see a counselor, they are incredibly fearful about the backlash they would receive, that their families and friends do not understand, and they are forcing smiles to the world around them while they suffer inside. Counseling is especially critical for victims of sexual assault and rape who often struggle from PTSD. I would not be where I am today had I not had that support, and yet the majority of these victims in Kashmir live the rest of their lives without proper medical care or mental health support. This is unacceptable and must change, not only because women deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, but because I firmly believe Kashmiri women and girls are the key to resolving this conflict, and if they are given a seat at the table. And they can't have a seat at the table if they are not given the proper medical care and resources to thrive in society, as well as the ability to make their own decisions about how they live their lives. So I will clearly reiterate that women and girls must be provided with access to proper education, medical care, and mental health support. Women must be permitted to make decisions over their own bodies and lives, and societal stigma around these must change. And while I recognize that is not easy, everyone must do their part in fostering that change if they want a better future for women and for Kashmir. Advocacy and grassroots movements around ending sexual and physical violence toward women at the hands of the Indian Army must also continue and increase. There can be no tolerance, and we must make it known to the international community and United Nations that such behavior must be firmly addressed with consequences. And I hope that the US, UK, and Pakistan can work closely together on this issue as a united front. When Kashmir and the international community uplift Kashmiri women and girls, they in return will be able to best fight for Kashmir's freedom and a better society and future for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel, for your much detailed speech, and we really got to understand and to find out much information. Just a kind of reminder, I would like everybody to please have a 5-minute speech, because we have many speakers over here who have commitments and they're waiting for their turn. So the next guest I'm going to call upon is Shasta Safi, who is a researcher and a human rights Kashmiri lobbyist. Shasta Safi, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Your Excellency Saddam Masood Khan Sir, for your detailed presentation on Kashmir, and thank you to all the other speakers who have highlighted all the important points. For me, my passion and my love for Kashmir doesn't come from because I was born in Indian occupied Kashmir. I was born in occupation, nor it is because my father is a political figure of this freedom movement, but my love and passion comes mostly because I've been raised by a woman, my mother, who had seen the occupation and who had suffered and seen the life of exile as well. So the passion and the compassion and this courage and love for Kashmir inside me was built when I saw my own mother struggling in occupation and then living her life in exile. And to be very honest, the first experience of mine in living in occupation when Indian occupational forces they raided our house, it was my mother's lap when she took me inside her farm and she comforted me, and I could hear her heartbeat racing, but she was comforting me and trying to relax me by saying that everything will be fine, and this is just a gesture of theirs while they are vandalizing your home or they're throwing your toys away. But she was the one who comforted me and made me see it as if it was not a big deal. So it was my mother who I saw when her family back in Kashmir, back in occupation, there was any deaths in Kashmir, and we used to be in exile mourning it alone. When there were some weddings in Kashmir in our families or friends or relatives, it was us in exile celebrating and singing the wedding songs alone. So for us, the people of Kashmir who are born in Kashmir or living in exile, there is a slight confusion in us that we sometimes sit and talk about, is occupation more dangerous or living in exile more dangerous? Because see the impact of occupation. We talk about rape being used as a weapon of war. We talk about the psychological impact of conflict on children, on younger ones, or the women especially. We talk about custodial killings and people being disappeared, half widows, molestations. We talk about the mass graves, and we talk about all these stuff. But what I always feel, we don't talk about the people who have moved away from the conflict, but conflict never leaves their minds, who are living in exile. People like us, people like my mother, people like most of us who are living in Azad Kashmir or living in diaspora or living in Pakistan, those families are also suffering. So today, on this Women's Day, I dedicate this Women's Day to all those mothers and all those women, and especially those mothers who are living in occupation and who are living in exile as well, because the psychological impact of occupation and exile, both, this is very saddening to see how our mothers are living without living the experience of their homeland. They have to leave their families. We saw on 5th August 2019 when all the communication was blacked out, and then we came again to the edge that we were unaware of our family and friends, whether they were alive or dead. That time we realized what living in exile can do to your mental health as well. So today's Women's Day, we have talked about, most of the speakers talked about rape, molestations, all the cruelties that are being committed in an occupation, along with all those women that are in conflict, this Women's Day I dedicate to women who are in exile and who are giving their lives and who are sacrificing their families and friends and who are speaking up against this oppression while living in diaspora, while living in exile, while dealing all the traumas and mental issues themselves. They are speaking and they are raising the voice for voiceless people. So this Women's Day dedicated to the people who are living in exile as well, and to making the pledge that we'll keep on raising the voice for the people. We'll be the advocates, we'll be the lobbyists, and we will be the advocates of those people on ground. We have to amplify their voice. We don't have to add any more to that, any flavor to that, but we have to just amplify the voices coming from the ground, and we will keep on doing that. And women have shown that along with the support and along with the commitment they have with our men's who are suffering in conflict as well, we shoulder to shoulder we can work properly with our other gender as well. And this is not that only women are suffering in conflict. Today, as we are talking about, it's a Women's Day. That's why we are mostly talking about what's happening to women. Otherwise, every human that is in conflict is suffering in Kashmir. And we see that when a bullet runs, when a bullet is fired or a pellet is fired, it never sees the gender, it never sees the religion. We have seen Insha being hit, when we have seen many young boys being hit by bullets and pellets. So just to end up today's discussion, I will like to thank Tehreek-e-Kashmir for always capitalizing these events and talking about Kashmir and making it very relevant to all these international days that are being celebrated all over the world. And thank you, Rehana, for moderating today's event and realizing and asking the people to be on the time. So I'll just end up by saying thank you to Tehreek-e-Kashmir, and thank you to Fahim Kiani as well.
Thank you, Shaista Safi, for your timekeeping and your great speech. I would like to call upon my next guest, Rahat Farooq Raja, ex-Joint Secretary, Supreme Court Bar Association, please. Rahat Farooq Raja, please.
Hello.
Hello, yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all of you, and I am very thankful to President Sardar Masood Khan for his comprehensive words upon Kashmir issue, and thankful to all previous speakers who very comprehensively discussed about the conflict of Kashmir, and I am thankful to organizer of this conference for providing me opportunity to share my views on the International Women's Day and speak about a very important topic, that is Kashmiri women struggle under conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, as we know that Kashmir, which is known as paradise on earth, has now become the synonymous of earth, has synonymous with death, destruction, and genocide. As you know, this conflict has its roots in colonialism. It has been sold without the will and wish of public and its people of Kashmir to Hindu Dogra for amount of 75 lakhs under Treaty of Amritsar in 1846. This conflict has its due impact on the women who are more exposed to insecurity because they are preoccupied with children and with their homes. But they are resisting bravely against the cruelty and illegal possession of India for last 7 decades. Ladies and gentlemen, the women of Kashmir are losing their lives, are sacrificing their blood, and they are losing their sons, their husbands, and term of widows has been firstly introduced in this movement. Sexual violence being used as a weapon by Indian soldiers And the armed conflict in Kashmir past 1989 has forced the women of the valley to take on new roles. They served the jail sentence with their sons, their husbands in different parts of Kashmir and India. These women have had to shoulder heavy responsibilities within and outside their homes. But we, as you know, that these rubs and worries has more empowered them. I would like to conclude my suggestions, conclude my words with these suggestions that international community must take cognizance upon the brutality in process against Kashmir. This international community who have take most who have take very sorry. Hello.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. This international community who is very careful for the rights of animals, and but they are ignoring the rubs and worries which is being in process against the Kashmiris by the Indian forces. Responsibilities of Kashmiris should be representatives of Kashmiris should be provided opportunity to contest their case at international level. While concluding, I would pay tribute to brave Kashmiri women who are spilling their blood, who are sacrificing their lives for our better future. I would say very thankful. I'm very thankful to Fahim Kabir and organizers of this beautiful conference, who is.
Many thanks for your words, Rahat Farooq Raja. The next guest I'm going to call upon is a Kashmiri lobbyist and is the president of WKFM, Muzammil Ayub Thakur, please. Muzammil Ayub Thakur, are you there? I can't hear you, Muzammil Ayub Thakur.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Sorry, I was unable to unmute. I apologize for my tardiness. It's been a very busy day with COVID and the rules changing in the UK, so it's been very busy with work. But I'd like to thank the organizers for hosting me, and especially on this day, the Women's International Day. There isn't much more that I can add to, considering all the other speakers have mentioned so many valid points. However, I would like to remind everybody that when we talk about Kashmir, we talk about the human rights violations. We have to remember the case studies as well, the individuals, that anything that happens to a single person, it doesn't just happen to that person, it happens to everybody within that family, within that community, within the wider, the circle of humanity. And when we talk about the occupation, we understand who is occupying us and what their targets are, why they use violence against us. We've seen so many different models in history of what colonization and imperialism looks like. But the modern warfare, what India is using inside Kashmir, is nothing short of criminal, nothing short of targeted harassment, human rights violations that have exceeded all limits to the extent of genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing. And it is unfortunate that even in today's day and age that we are unable to see a wider support for the people of Kashmir from the international community, especially those that profess to be feminists, or those that profess to uphold child rights, or those that profess to be humanists. And that is a problem that I see, that despite being a just cause, a cause that has legal and moral roots, that we don't see the international community focus on the issues that matter to them the way that it matters to us. What I mean to say is that when we realize, or when we speak about Kashmir, for example, the occupation, the impact that it has on the environment, and those that are environmentalists don't come to see what is happening in Kashmir. When we talk about child rights, those that profess to be advocates of child rights don't come to Kashmir. And when we speak about the women of Kashmir, the feminists don't stand up for Kashmir, not even those that are sitting in India that claim to not sit on either side of the fence. So I'll conclude by saying that we need to be able to reach out to the wider community, to those people, and use their language and understand their thoughts and their thought patterns and what moves them. And once we can identify the core roots and the core values of other people in the world, we can target and campaign accordingly to make our movement more effective, more efficient, and inshallah resolve the issue of Kashmir once and for all. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Muslim Ayub. I would like to call upon my next guest, Yahya Akhtar, Director Information Cell, Tehreek-e-Kashmir UK. Yahya Akhtar, please.
Thank you very much. I begin with the good news. I live in Derby in the United Kingdom, and the good news is that in our police chief constable, in our city, the deputy chief constable and the assistant chief constable, all are great women. They're doing a great job. But originally I come from Kashmir. There's no good news from there about women. You might have heard from a sister who is in American president's cabinet, and she has told the account of her torment when the Indian occupying forces took her family men away. And that is the kind of torture every woman is going through. When a man is taken away, she has to pull through the family through all those difficulties. And when her son is taken away right in front of her eyes, and when lastly her modesty is attacked, then our sisters in Kashmir come under attack from all four sides. And that is the thing we appreciate. And we want to send our message to sisters that we appreciate your dignity and your struggle. We have not forgotten you. And inshallah, we will keep our efforts to free you from the terrorist army of India, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you, Yahya Akhtar. The next speech is actually going to be from myself. So I'm going to be taking five minutes myself, and then I'm going to be passing this speech on to Fahim Kiani, the president of Tehreek-e-Kashmir. I would like to start saying, in my speech is that first, I will say once again, Happy International Women's Day. It's sad that even after 73 years, Kashmiri women are struggling under conflict and crying for justice. In conflicts, female of all ages seem to suffer more as they become rape victims, which is used in the war against them. And due to these rape victims, they actually suffer with mental, physical, and sexual abuse. And it not only affects them, but it affects the whole family, especially if they are married and they have children. Being mothers, they nurture and maintain family units more effectively than fathers. But in these circumstances, they're not able to actually maintain themselves well. Because if you're not mentally feeling well, you're not able to do anything. I would like to also say a few things more. In my opinion, the first thing that we should be working upon is the black laws which have been applied in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. I would like to touch upon that they have a few laws there, like Public Safety Act 1978. Under this law, anybody can be detained. And as the Excellency has actually explained before, that once somebody has been detained, they can be kept for 2 years. And what Indian forces are doing at the moment, just before 2 years are touching upon, they're making sure that they actually renew it again by making sure to put them in prison. So many of our brothers and even sisters are being detained, and they have been in prison for a very long time. And because under the detain, you're not allowed to have any kind of lawyer or any family access. So this process is going on for years. The other law which I would like to touch upon, which is the most dangerous law in the world, and I'm quite surprised that the United Nations have not taken any kind of action against it. This law has been in Jammu and Kashmir for 31 years. And due to this law, many of our sisters are getting raped. Many people are getting killed. Many people are searched on roads. And under this law, they can break into your house. They can search your house. Even on suspicion, they can arrest you, kill you, rape you. They can do whatever they like because they are being given immunity. This law is called Armed Forces Special Armed Forces Special Act 1990. Under this law, under Section 7, the army officers are given immunity. Immunity means that they can get away with murder, they can get away with rape, they can get away with anything. And many of the army officers are actually misusing their powers. If we look into the history of Jammu and Kashmir, we can see a lot of massacres and rape. Like a few days ago, we actually had Corner Poshpara a conference, and it was about the rape, like when the whole unit turned up on these two villages and they raped the women. Some of the women passed away. Some of the women, some girls were there from the age of 13, and some women till the age of 80 were actually raped. So I would call upon the United Nations, I will call upon the world, I would like to call upon our president of Azad Kashmir to please make sure the first thing we can do is we can get this law removed. We can let the world know that this law exists, which is illegal. In itself, it's an illegal law. And this law has been there for 31 years and is given the power. And under this law, because they have immunity, so they are not going to be tried to court. There's not going to be any evidence provided. Nobody is going to listen to us. So I will actually close my speech on after this verse, and after I would like to call upon the president of Tehreek-e-Kashmir UK, Fahim Gyani, to actually have the closing remarks, followed by the Excellency, the president of Azad Jammu and Kashmir.
Thank you very much, Rehana. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Pakistan, and good evening in Australia. I would like to thank His Excellency Sardar Masood Khan, President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, British MPs, former Australian Senator, human rights activists, and everyone for your participation in this International Women Conference titled Kashmiri Women's Struggles Under Conflict on International Women's Day. Women in conflict zones carry the heaviest burdens and bear the greatest weight of occupation. Same is the case with Kashmiri women. Kashmir represents the worst case of human barbarity, and particularly the condition of women in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir is vulnerable. Women in Kashmir don't enjoy the basic rights which are given under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and even promised under the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, adopted in 1979 by the United Nations General Assembly, described as an International Bill of Rights for Women. This defines women's rights and their fundamental freedom in the political, economical, social, cultural, and civil, or any other sphere of life. Unfortunately, the international instruments have no impact on the situation of human rights in Kashmir. And Indian government is not providing the basic rights to the Kashmiri people, especially to women. That's why Indian government doesn't allow international representatives and foreign media to enter in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Root cause of women's rights violation in Kashmir is illegal Indian occupation. The occupation is multidimensional: military, political, cultural aggression, and no access to human rights. Indian forces have sexually assaulted and gang raped more than 11,000 women in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir since 1990, and over 2,500 women have been killed by Indian Army as well in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Indian Army is using rape as a weapon of war. Their husbands, brothers, and sons are brutally murdered in front of their eyes. Similarly, males of the family are forced to stand while their women are being raped. It is a psychological trauma, and to be a woman has become a crime in Kashmir. Kashmiri women are victims of Indian war crimes. Ratio of stress-related diseases has increased from 10% to 60 to 70% from 1990 till date, making 70 out of 100 women are psychological patients. Women carry burden of murdered men as they are unable to earn livelihood for themselves and for their children in presence of 1 million Indian troops. For international community, the Kashmiri women are a forgotten chapter. If sexual assault against women is committed in other countries, the conscience of international community is jolted and it responds. But when Kashmiri women are victimized, conscience of the world is silent because it is driven by realpolitik. Bigger the country, more influential it is, more impunity it will have. Justice should not be selective, and this message should go from the civil society to important capitals, which influence the decision across the globe. Violence against women is a crime against humanity. So international community should pressurize Indian government that the psychological trauma faced by half widows whose husbands have disappeared should come to an end, and India should provide access to information regarding disappeared persons. Rapes and sexual assault of Kashmiri women by Indian forces should be condemned internationally, and international forums and human rights organizations should play the effective role in this regard. Thank you very much. Freedom for all, freedom for Kashmir.
Thank you for Fahim Kiani, President of Tehreek-e-Kashmir UK. We have one more speaker with us, Mohammed Ghalib, who is the President of Europe at the Tehreek-e-Kashmir. Could I call upon Mohammed Ghalib, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm sorry, I do apologize that I just joined in because I had another commitment at the same time as this conference as well. I would like to welcome all the speakers and the participants, and especially the President of Jammu and Kashmir, Sardar Masood Khan Sahab. While today we are observing this International Women's Day, I was checking the list of the violation of women in Indian occupied Kashmir. Since 1989 up to today, there are 11,235 women have been gang raped, and there are 22,000, more than 22,000 widowed, and since in last 20 years, 675 women have been killed. I mean, the number of the figures are growing up, and we can see the international community and the international human rights organizations and the relief agencies are not allowed. Where everyone knows that women are the men suffering in the Indian occupied Kashmir, because when their husbands are in jail or killed, or they have no one to look after, it is the women who go and who suffer most of the time. So I think on this day, on the 8th of the March, which is International Women's Day, we should demand the United Nations and international, especially the British government, where I think that there is a parliamentary human rights committee in the parliament as well. We should also meet the human rights and the parliamentary human rights committee. And I think that Tehreek-e-Kashmir UK is doing a great job, as I am only working on the European side, but Fahim Kiani Sahab and his team, especially Rihanna and other ladies in the Tehreek-e-Kashmir, they're doing a great job. And I think at this time that we need to do some practical work, practical steps to stop all this what's happening with the women in occupied Kashmir. Thank you very much.
Many thanks for your kind words, Mohammed Ghalib. I would like to call upon the Excellency Sardar Masood Khan for his closing remarks, please.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity again. One thing that I want to highlight, women professionals in the occupied territory are a special target, especially journalists, because if women journalists are active and they are active on social media or traditional media, they are targeted by Indian occupation forces. I also want to highlight that there are some forums available for redress of this kind of outrage. I mean, in addition to the laws, for instance, the Genocide Convention or the Fourth Geneva Convention, will deal with the humanitarian dimensions of warfare. There are many other forums. For instance, there is this Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. It's a treaty body. It is called CEDAW. And they should take cognizance of this outrage in the occupied Kashmir against Kashmiri women. There is also a group or an open setting meeting arrangement in the United Nations Security Council under the banner of Women, Peace and Security. Usually they hold these ARIA formula meetings in which all the council members participate. And recently, I must highlight that they have addressed the plight of women in Myanmar, Ethiopia, Yemen, Syria, and Somalia. But I'm surprised that this committee of the United Nations Security Council has not held a single meeting about the suffering of the Kashmiri women, although their suffering or crimes against Kashmiri women have been reported widely by Human Rights Watch, Asia Watch, Amnesty International, Physicians for Human Rights, and 2 United Nations Human Rights Council reports. In fact, the reports by the High Commissioner for Human Rights, which were released in 2018 and 2019. But the Security Council and CEDAW have been unable to take cognizance of these reports. I would say, I mean, very cynically, I would say that then this all boils down to a charade, that you do not address, you're selective, as one of the participants said, that there should be no selectivity in dealing with women's rights. While there is selectivity when it comes to the United Nations Security Council or the CEDAW. Let me also tell you that there's this resolution which was adopted very recently. It is called Resolution 2467 of the United Nations Security Council, which calls on member states to ensure prevention and response are non-discriminatory and respect the rights and prioritize the needs of survivors of sexual conflict or sexual violence during conflicts, notably in the context of the health of the survivors, their education, and their participation in the mainstream society. Now, let me tell you that one of the reasons that the Security Council is not taking up the issue of Kashmiri women is because India is sitting on the Security Council as a non-permanent member, and hence another source of selectivity. As many speakers have highlighted, that this culture of impunity and immunity, absolute immunity, underwritten by inattention or selectivity demonstrated by the international community, should be called out. This culture that prevails, and it is reinforced by 3 black laws, in fact. One is Armed Forces Special Powers Act, the other is Public Safety Act, the third is Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. This last act is that you apprehend somebody before he or she has committed a crime. So this is a kind of anticipatory. This is a colonial measure, as a matter of fact, worse than colonial measures. It's a fascist measure, measures that were taken by Hitler's Germany or Mussolini's Italy. Now, let me also tell you that I endorse fully these calls made by lawmakers and other participants of today's webinar that state terrorism, targeted harassment, genocide, and war crimes that are being committed in the occupied territory, particularly against women, should be highlighted by all forums and should be banished, as a matter of fact. I mean, there's applicable law to take action. And because I would say that why are feminists silent? Why is international civil society silent? I would call upon the leadership of the United Kingdom, Mr. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Mr. Dominic Raab, who is the Foreign Secretary, to take up this issue or take this issue to the Security Council, to the United Nations Security Council, and hold a debate on this under the ARIA formula format. I would also appeal all of you to dedicate this day to Asia Indrabi, a lady in her 60s who is in Tihar jail, one of the most notorious jails in India, where she's being tortured and threatened with execution, and her two companions, Fahmida Sufi and Nahida Nasri. Now, what is their crime? They have never picked up a gun. They have never used a gun. They have never incited hatred or violence. All they have said that they want their right to self-determination, they want their liberty, they want their fundamental freedoms and civil liberties. And for that crime, they're being tortured in Tihar jail. My last point is that beyond formalism, beyond these webinars, beyond this diplomatic, legal, and media lingo that we use, Kashmiri women and girls' pain should be felt by everyone, men and women all around the world. Their pain should become your pain. And then you would realize what they're going through. Besieged, raped, molested, discriminated, marginalized, hounded by predators. Now, there should be a way to stop this. And I think these voices that are being raised today from London and from all around the world, they make a difference. And we should be able to stop these crimes against humanity, these crimes against Kashmiri women and girls. And I'm sure that we will succeed. I want to thank Mr. Tehreek-e-Kashmir for his initiative, for his remarks, and Ms. Rehana Ali for her remarks, and also for conducting this session. I'm grateful to the speakers, Ms. Debbie Abrams, Afzal Khan, Lee Rhiannon from Australia, Daniel Khan, Shaista Safi, Zamal Thakur, Rahat Farooq Raja, Yahya Akhtar, and Mr. Ghalib, for their very, very moving and substantive presentations today. This makes a difference. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tehreek-e-Kashmir. Thank you so much, Mr. Tehreek-e-Kashmir. And thank you, everybody, for standing